Hello, I'm Joe Reardon, and I'd like to welcome you to our 2022 Por Cristo annual event. This is the third year now that we've held this event virtually, and I think you know why. Ecuador was among the hardest hit countries in the world in terms of the impact of COVID-19. I have to tell you, I'm so extraordinarily proud of our staff and the manner in which they've carried on and worked through these really extraordinary times. One aspect of our work that was sidelined is the work of our pediatric cardiology team. Now, I'd like to contrast the work of our staff in Ecuador. They work at the Por Cristo Nutrition and Health Center, which is located in Guayaquil, is a primary care facility open 52 weeks a year serving the local community. I contrast that with the cardiac team, which is a group of doctors, nurses, technicians drawn from the United States under the real tremendous leadership of Dr. Tom Haugen. And they work with a similar group of doctors, nurses, and technicians from Ecuador, hand in hand. Well, in 2019, we were all set to go, and we were sidelined by some political unrest in Ecuador. But we figured, we'll just be back next spring, everything will be fine. Then, of course, came COVID. So the team hasn't been able to travel, but I'm happy to tell you that as of recent months, we've been planning on their return this coming October, and we're all very excited about that. What we're going to do in our presentation here is tell you a little bit about this team over 30 years. It's been 30 years that they've been active in Ecuador. Now, I've been in my role here with Por Cristo for 27 years, and prior to that, I was a volunteer and I was on the board, so I've really had kind of that 30-year perspective. And that's really a wonderful gift in that the work of Por Cristo is such, be it the work in our clinic or the work of the cardiac team, that you don't necessarily see day-to-day progress. It's very incremental progress. But when you have an occasion like we have now, and you say, let's take a look at 30 years of the work of the cardiac team, it's extraordinary, the differences that have come about over that period of time. So I hope you'll enjoy the presentation we've put together that honoring Dr. Haugen and the team's 30 years of service. Without you, it wouldn't have been possible. And as you watch it, if you should feel the urge, we really welcome your support, which is so essential as the team returns to Ecuador.
I was introduced to Por Cristo when I was at the Tufts New England Medical Center Floating Hospital, when some of the pediatricians in the Boston area knew about Por Cristo, and they knew about the plight of the children in the Alejandro Mann Hospital in Guayaquil, Ecuador. And they told this story about these children who were basically living in the hospital. They were so sick, and there was no other care for them. And because of that, in 1987, these pediatricians thought that more children could be helped if there was an organized cardiac effort in Ecuador. So in 1989, I was invited to go to Ecuador with some other Americans to tour the area, look at hospitals in Guayaquil, and also in Quito. And at that time, the hospital in Guayaquil was in much more need of help with cardiac patients than in Quito.
I think I was on the second trip that Tom ever made from that point. The simplest definition of what I do is I solve medical problems with technology. So I'm the guy that integrates the technology to the medicine. After listening to what Tom wanted to accomplish, my first impression was, you gotta be kidding. I didn't see how in the world we were going to establish a pediatric heart program in that institution.
The hospital had running water most of the day, electricity most of the day. It was in such poor condition that cats lived in the hallways and in the hospital. So we saw all these cats, and what are these cats doing in the hospital? And they said, no, those are our friends. They keep the mice away.
There was a day when we lost power in the ICU. That means that ventilators were not working. And we had to start using whatever we could to oxygenate children.
When we first got there, they were having a cholera epidemic not far from the Isla, where they had a field hospital on the road. And the physician that was taking care of the patients there was asking us, what do we do? And we were explaining to them about pediatric cardiac, and basically he sort of broke out in laughter and said, for what you guys spend on one kid, we can save this whole barrio over here.
I think that introduction in Alejandro Mann, in a way, set the tone for our team, because we realized how far behind cardiac care was in Ecuador. No fault of the patients or the general population. And coming from major medical centers in the United States that have every possible piece of equipment and technique and expertise and depth in every specialty, to find that these doctors and nurses in the Alejandro Mann were trying to do their best with very limited equipment and supplies was very impressive. So we started out trying to incorporate the life and situation of the nurses, the patient, and the physicians. Instead of trying to impose what we do in the United States on the Ecuadorians, we were able to do cardiac surgery, very simple cardiac surgery, and some simple diagnostic tests. We brought a lot of donated equipment. And after about 4 years, they were doing okay, and they were in the process of getting another big hospital. So then we moved our effort up to Quito, the capital.
Inicié a trabajar en Hospital Baca Ortiz por el año de 1994, cuando también en este país se iniciaba las subespecialidades pediátricas, de tal manera que no éramos conocidos. Éramos muy pocos los que habíamos con este tipo de trabajo. Entonces se estaba formando el servicio de cardiología en el hospital. Y yo por lo mismo no teníamos ni equipamiento necesario ni tampoco equipo de cirugía. Primero tuve contacto con el equipo de Por Cristo, se puede decir, donde nos conocieron, explicamos nuestras ilusiones, nuestras deficiencias. Entonces él llevó un resumen de lo que había encontrado y se hizo un comité. Y el comité decidió venir a ayudarnos. La primera experiencia fue fantástica porque ellos vieron el interés que nosotros teníamos y la semana que ellos venían era en blanco para nosotros. Trabajábamos con ellos como nunca hemos hecho, es decir, de 7 a 4, 5, 6 o 7 de la noche, sin salir del hospital.
La relación del Hospital Baca Ortiz, de los médicos del Hospital Baca Ortiz con los médicos del Grupo Por Cristo es una relación que desde sus inicios fue muy clara y fue sólida en términos de lo que nosotros esperábamos y ellos esperaban. Siempre se ha manejado con términos de intercambio de conocimientos. Nosotros entendemos que hay equipos que tienen más experiencia y nosotros nos nutrimos de esa experiencia, pero también tenemos una contraparte en términos de lo que se hace en un ambiente diferente al que se maneja en un país de primer mundo como los Estados Unidos. Es bueno, creo yo, porque siempre hemos tenido una relación homogénea de igualdad en términos de respeto con las personas, en términos de respeto profesional.
Dijo mi compañero, el doctor Ochoa, éramos ciegos y volvimos a ver, porque empezamos a trabajar en materia, con otro equipamiento, con otra visión y teniendo la esperanza de empezar a hacer las cirugías en el hospital. En esa semana nosotros trabajábamos, como decir, tal vez el 20% de todo el año, porque lográbamos, por ejemplo, solo en estudios de ecocardiografía, por lo bajo unos 200 o 300 ecos en la semana que ellos se quedaban.
We're there to help them because otherwise it's not a sustaining effort. We don't go there to just evaluate how they're doing today. We want to leave with them being able to do a few things better. Now, that's taken a lot of work to do that on their part, because they've had to advocate for better equipment with the government, better systems, personnel, in a situation where they have very little control on budget, personnel. However, what has happened over the years, the mortality has fallen. Successful surgical cases, the caseload has gone way up because the surgeons are better, the cardiologists are better making diagnoses. To see what the nurses have learned, even the secretaries and how they put their data together and keep their medical records. It's sustained because of that. One of the good things, we train nurses and they leave and they go someplace else to a better position, which is better for them and their families, which is, I think, a success. So the community has gained some medical expertise, even though those people are not always at the hospital where we work in. That's the greater good.
Nos vemos muy vinculados, ya que ellos nos actualizan, coordinamos actividades en beneficio de la atención de los pacientes. Es decir, que nuestra relación va vinculada netamente a la atención del paciente quirúrgico cardíaco. Los beneficios que el hospital brinda a la comunidad es muy amplia, la demanda es excesiva, pero nosotros como personal de salud hemos tratado de cubrir todas las necesidades, tanto en el aspecto psicológico, físico, de los pacientes, en especial las patologías más frecuentes, por ejemplo, de especialidad como es la cardiotorácica, ¿no? Cirugías cardiotorácicas que se hacen son muy amplias y muy valederas y muy beneficiosos para los pacientes de la comunidad.
I've been with the team from the beginning. My role with the team is a pediatric nurse practitioner, so I really get to do my job that I do here in Spanish. I grew up bilingual, so I have that gift that was given to me. So I find it really fun when I go with the team to Ecuador to just be able to converse and to make good friends with the people that we work with. And I think that's been really important because trust and how you take care of critically ill children is a big deal. It's probably the hallmark of how good care gets delivered.
Yes, we're here to help and to educate and to teach and to gain something, but we're part of a team. There's a lot to learn. As much as we give, we receive, and that's from the team there and the patients there.
It was a Tuesday in September 2001, happened to be the 11th of September. We were working in different parts of the city doing procedures at the hospital and some other clinics when on the little monitor in one of our control rooms, they showed these airplanes crashing into the World Trade Center.
I was in the cath lab, I'll never forget it. We were watching this scene unfolding in between patients.
Many of the Ecuadorians had relatives in New York, and particularly there's a neurosurgeon, Ecuadorian neurosurgeon doing surgery. He heard about the news. He stepped back from the operating room because his son lived in New York. And somehow he went back to finish the case because what was in front of him at that moment was more important than what was happening to his family in New York. And we all went through that. About the same time, our team suffered a great personal loss in the midst of this at that very morning.
One of our cardiologists died. Again, a very, very sad, very depressing, very shocking.
Because of the circumstances of being far away from home, dealing with a personal tragedy, the community, including the hospital personnel, the people in the hotel, the physicians, really rallied.
As a team, we were so shocked by everything that happened, but yet we regrouped as a team and we knew we were here to do some work, and very important work. And so through everything that happened, we continued to do the work.
Aquí nuestro equipo de trabajo, nuestra área, nuestro servicio es como una familia. En muchas ocasiones, por el tipo de patología, tienen que estar mucho tiempo aquí los pacientes y con sus padres. Y sabemos que nosotros somos los médicos, el paciente, y tiene que haber un distanciamiento en el trato. Pero a veces no se puede, es difícil. Llegamos a establecer lazos afectivos muy especiales, especialmente en estos pacientes con patologías muy graves. A veces no hay nada más que hacer. ¿Cómo afrontar eso? ¿Cómo decirle que ya no se pudo hacer nada más? Y mire, a veces lo que a veces tanto nos llega a nosotros, a los padres, han visto todo lo que se hace, todo lo que hace el equipo, fallece el paciente y nos dicen gracias. ¿Se da cuenta todo lo que eso significa en nosotros? Es doloroso, pero en parte nos sentimos con nosotros mismos satisfechos porque los padres se dieron cuenta que nosotros entregamos absolutamente el 100%, el 200% para que salgan bien nuestros pacientes.
At Baca Ortiz, one night, I stayed back because one kid wasn't doing well, and the child went on to go into cardiac arrest. And it was pretty dicey, but then the second kid went into cardiac arrest. And so we needed our team back. The rest of the team had already gone ahead to the hotel. And so we have phones that were given, and so I couldn't get to my phone, so I had the nurse pull my phone out, and I said, hit that number. And I said, we need Haugen now. We really need some help.
Tom and I ran back to the hospital.
But in the course of that, our intensivist was trying to resuscitate one, I was trying to resuscitate the other, and all I remember was there was only enough epinephrine to fill one syringe. And if you could imagine, I called for it and it came flying, someone threw it over to our bedside because there was no one to run it over. And the nurse quickly got it and I go, give this amount right now. And then they called for it and it went back the other way. The really thing that will stay with me and why I was talking about our team is that Tom and Dot showed up. And immediately there was how can we help?
One of the children had survived, and unfortunately one of the children hadn't.
All I remember is Tom helping the intensivist support him. And then there was this beautiful thing that Dot Becky did.
There was a whole team crowded around with the child that survived, and so I thought, okay, I'm gonna help the nurse with the patient who didn't, and she was doing post-mortem care and cleaning the child up in a way that you have a language barrier. She didn't speak English. I don't really speak so much Spanish. And we just silently did our work, knowing what we needed to do.
I just walked home that night saying, I'm so lucky to work with this team. It's just those moments were so important.
There were many times where you met with different people and you saw the situation and you knew that what you were dealing with and what you're looking at is kind of hopeless. And you go back to your hotel in the evening and you think about these kids and you know what the outcome is going to be, and you can't help but the tears. But then you kind of get yourself back together and say, well, there'll be others that'll make it. You know what I mean? Let's focus in, not that we're giving up on the one, but let's focus in on the ones that can.
We had one little 15, 18-month-old with severe obstruction of the valve leading out to his lung, and he was very blue. And we took him to the catheterization lab. We put a catheter in that had a balloon at its tip, positioned it at the valve. And I was at the end of the catheter inflating it. And I could feel how rigid that valve was, and then it gave way and opened. And I looked down over the sterile gowns covering the child, and his lips, which were blue, became pink. You know, that was a very rewarding experience.
Ahí siempre son cosas nuevas que aparecen. En los libros no se relata lo que puede aparecer en la vida real. El desafío a veces es poder trabajar cuando no tenemos las condiciones que desearíamos al 100% tener. Ese desafío es periódico, no muy frecuente, pero el poder tratar de mejorar con las condiciones que tenemos, pues los hemos hecho. Recordemos que nosotros gran cantidad de nuestros pacientes son de un estrato de pobreza y obviamente tenemos que brindarles a ellos todo lo que nosotros como una institución pública podemos hacerlo. La realidad es que no siempre se puede acceder a esto, pero hemos tenido la capacidad de llegar a como de lugar a poder soportar este tipo de procedimientos.
Tom is the glue that holds this group together.
El doctor Hogan era el jefe.
As many will fondly call him El Jefe.
The jefe.
Regardless of what role we have in the team, our voice is equal. There is no such thing that I'm the boss and I'm the big time doctor and you people are the others. So there is this camaraderie, and Tom has always been that way.
I've known Tom now for 30 some odd years. First met him in 1994 on the first visit I ever made to Ecuador. And it so happened that the cardiac team was there at that time. And I think like many people, I had a very common reaction, which was, good God, how are we ever going to accomplish anything? How are we ever going to be helpful here? And I got to see Tom, though, and his team, and I saw our other, Por Cristo volunteers and staff down there in operation, and soon I learned, this is how it's done. It's done through people like Tom.
Nosotros siempre hemos tenido el concepto de una persona profesionalmente muy buena. Es un médico reconocido en el ambiente cardiológico pediátrico en su país de origen, Estados Unidos, y creo que en muchas otras partes más, que lidera un grupo de personas con características similares en la profesión médica y de enfermería y paramédica. Pero lo importante de Tom Hogan es que siempre ha sido un hombre que ha manejado la relación con mucha consideración, en un marco de respeto, ahora de afecto y de amistad con la gente, conmigo y con la gente del equipo del Hospital Pediátrico Bacortiz. Siempre hemos buscado con él respuestas a nuestras necesidades de cooperación y esas respuestas han sido siempre efectivas. Hemos tenido una respuesta de apoyo en todos los campos, incluido no solo el tema de transferencia de conocimientos, pero también conseguir, por ejemplo, equipamientos, insumos que nosotros no podíamos disponer en determinado momento y que los necesitábamos. Y esto siempre ha estado a través de Tom Hogan.
Over the years, his commitment to outreach, to really investing a portion of his life in the betterment of others has been something that I have seen that I admire greatly.
Nuestra relación fue siempre de muchísimo respeto y con él, ¿no? Pero poco en poco él trataba de hacer como de nuestra cultura. Por ejemplo, como nosotros los ecuatorianos nos abrazamos cuando nos encontramos. Al siguiente viaje él nos abrazaba antes que nosotros. Entonces rompía bastante el hielo y siempre le admirábamos porque estaba pendiente de todo su equipo. Eso era lo que tenía él de bonito.
We come from these 10 or 12 individuals, and all of a sudden when we surround Tom, we all of a sudden are a team, and it's because of what he is able to do. It's because of his personality and because of his leadership skills that really makes all of that work so well.
Para nosotros marcaba nuestra vida. Iniciaba el año y estábamos pensando cuándo va a venir el equipo para coordinar, para tener los casos, para hacerlo mejor. Nosotros aprendimos con ellos y el secreto de nuestra unión fue ese compartir. Ellos no venían a trabajar solos, sino que teníamos un equipo que era binacional, se puede decir.
The mission of Por Cristo is so important, yet so simple. improving the health and well-being of children and their families.
One of the hallmarks of Por Cristo's work has always been to not be kind of the, for lack of a better term, the ugly American, which we've all heard that term, who kind of struts into town and says, we're here and here's how we do things and here's how you're going to do things. That is the antithesis of how Por Cristo has always operated, and certainly the cardiac team and Tom's methodology.
I'm a sister of Notre Dame de Namur, and our mission, as articulated by St. Julie Biot, our foundress, has to do with education of the poor and taking care of all kinds of people who need help, and especially that we need to be able to bring the goodness of God to anybody and everybody that we meet. And so certainly what Por Cristo is doing in that mission for helping the poor, particularly in the most abandoned places, and to be able to take those little children and do a miracle on their cardiac situations and be able, I think that's fabulous.
We are so grateful to have this opportunity to honor Dr. Haugen and his cardiac team and celebrate all the missions they have gone on over the years. If you would like to donate to Por Cristo in honor of Dr. Haugen and all of his mission trips, any amount is so appreciated.
A little donation for Por Cristo is incredibly important, and even if you think, well, it's not much, but for Por Cristo, it's enormous.
The work of Por Cristo in Ecuador has been sustained by the generous support and contributions of many, many people. I've been fortunate to work with a wonderful board at Por Cristo, and they have donated much support and time to the organization, not the cardiac team, but all of Por Cristo. The community in various ways around Washington and Boston and other cities have made contributions, including churches. And of course, many individuals who've been interested in helping poor children in Ecuador have contributed. And without that support, contribution, and deep interest in our work, none of it would be done. And we are all very grateful for these many supporters. And the cardiac team is particularly grateful because it takes a lot of resources to put the team together, travel, and do our work. And we are very grateful and pleased, privileged to be part of this organization.
Para las futuras generaciones, yo les pediría que no pierdan el contacto con esta institución, porque el que únicamente gana es el niño. El Hospital Bacortiz es un libro abierto, entonces tienes los casos más increíbles, entonces mutuamente hemos aprendido.
Going back after 3 years is going to be a little different. It's a different setting. COVID's still in the neighborhood. We have to be cautious with that. There's probably going to be some catching up to do on some of the teaching and so forth. But said that, I have confidence that we'll be able to push on and make progress.
I think that from our cardiac perspective and what we are able to do working there, okay, where are you now at Baca, and now what do we do to move forward from there?
Whenever we're there, and it seems kind of awkward that it's a once-a-year visit, but whenever we're there, you feel like you're back in family. That's my feeling. These people they're like my family.
My goal is to relinquish my position at some point to someone younger who's interested. Maybe it'll be a younger team member. And I look forward to that, because that's what progress means. You got to keep going, new ideas, new people. The work is going to be there. There's no end to cases, not only cardiac cases, but other kinds of pediatric diseases. We need to sometimes hit the refresh button and carry on.
We hope you've enjoyed our presentation in honor of Dr. Tom Haugen and the extraordinary cardiac team and all of the talent that they have provided over these many years. It's been our privilege to work with them, to watch them work, and we're really grateful. And we hope to see you in person next year.